There's always something going on in Singapore, and I always find it bizarre when people say it's boring, because it really isn't.
This is Alexander Knight, a Brit who moved from Russia to Singapore nearly 20 years ago. He lives here with his wife and 3 kids and runs a whiskey investment company. Alex shares what makes Singapore far from boring, why its school system is the best in the world, and how to make a 12% annual return on whiskey investments. I'm Max, your insider to immigrant life. Let's go!
One of the things I love about Singapore is the fact that it is so evenly split. You've got people from all walks of life and creeds and colours and things like that who are living here, who everyone more or less lives in harmony and sync. I mean, even with all these different religions, people seem to be very happy and live a very cohesive life here, which is great. That's one of the things that the UK could really learn from.
Especially now. I mean, that's a mess. It looks like a mess. I don't know if you read the news.
Yeah.
It looks like it's a mess all around the world.
Yeah, it does. And Singapore does that really, really beautifully to keep everyone harmonized and happy. It's not a superficial thing. I think people are genuinely pleased to live with each other and hang out and grow up and live together.
I found that most people are very unconfrontational, and saying no to somebody is quite confrontational. So I find that, I don't think it's Singaporeans necessarily, but certainly in Southeast Asia, the idea that people say no, it stops the conversation flow. Whereas if you say possibly it's something else, then it keeps that going. Oh really, why, what is it? So then people would then, well, if you do this, then that may happen. Certainly, having lived here for a long time, I always go with the flow. If people are like, come on, let's go and do this, I'm like, well, why not? It'll be fun. Let's try it. You know, particularly with food, which people are obsessed with here. But there's some really good food here too. And it's so, you know, people who are really obsessed with some bakute or something or other, go and try it. It might be good. You might like it. You might not, but at least you've tried it.
Are there any misconceptions about Singapore that you noticed?
People think it's boring. I completely disagree though. There's so much to do here. The cultural scene is deep as it is wide. You know, there's theatre, there's all the Dua Lipas in town at the moment, for example. I mean, there's all sorts of international concerts going on, a huge amount of theatre, and all sorts of different things going on. Of course, you've got all the different languages that are represented, you know, Chinese, Tamil, Malay, etc. And so it's sort of, there's always something to do. There's always some event going on. I think there's also the FinTech Expo going on, so obviously there's a big MICE area. So there's always something going on in Singapore, and I always find it bizarre when people say it's boring, because it really isn't.
I try to follow the events that happen in Singapore, and I start following Time Out Singapore.
Yeah.
And like few others, like on Instagram, and it's like every day something. So it's basically, you just need to look for it. But if you want to find like the concerts are here. If you want to find some, I don't know, art stuff.
Look, it's Christmas now already. Yeah, but you're right. You're absolutely right. There's always something going on, and you know, if you find yourself in a particular spot, go and try one of the dozens of local cuisines or dishes that there are here. I mean, it's endless, isn't it?
What's your favorite food?
I'm a big fan of the chili noodles. It's, you know, mee rebus and anything that's got vast amounts of chili in it. I love it, but particularly chili noodles. Yeah, and even chicken rice with masses of chili sauce all over it.
So your spice acceptance level increased through these 18 years?
Well, interestingly, as a Brit, we tend to put we had a lot of Indian food as I grew up. But now I find Indian food in the UK a bit bland, because it's not as spicy as it is here, for example, or as food is generally here.
The same for me with Russian food. Now it's like, oh, not too much taste. I need something more.
I'm a big fan of Russian food too.
Yeah,
absolutely love pelmeni and pyrezhki and all those things.
Yeah. I guess it was a big switch in 2006 when you moved from Russia to Singapore.
Right, so we went back in 2002, then I had a magazine business which I sold. Then we came here, which was a massive change because you didn't have to worry about it being -30, whereas every day it's just +30. Everything was in English, of course, and the law in Singapore is based on UK law. So the transition coming here was quite straightforward.
This is actually one of my favorite streets in Singapore. It's so lovely here. I love it.
Yeah, I love it too.
You can feel the vibe of like Singaporean local culture, and also it's very international. right?
Absolutely,
Yeah.
and it's all about 100 years, 110 years old.
Yeah.
Some of the buildings are much older, actually. I think the temple's 150 even. But this mosque is quite interesting because it's like a terraced mosque. You
Yeah.
don't get those. Normally they're standalone buildings.
You will see many people here actually, like around during I think midday, during the
Yeah.
afternoon.
It's quite interesting actually
Yeah.
because everyone comes and double parks along here because they know that the traffic wardens won't come and do anything about it because
Yeah.
people are in the mosque. It's quite one of those little quirks that you understand about Telokaya Street when you've been here a while.
Yeah. There are like 3 or 4 different religions presented here on this.
Within about 500 meters, it's
Yeah.
fascinating. So you've got the Methodists there, you've got the mosque, there's the Chinese temple, then there's an Indian Association temple thing up here, which is it's just fascinating.
The Chinese temple is one of the most famous one actually in Singapore.
It is, and it's one of the oldest, I think, too. I mean, this whole area at the time this was the river where everyone was unloading all the goods and things like that, where Singapore was obviously this huge transport hub during times of empire. It still is now, obviously, but containerized. So this is where people used to live and work in this area around here in Chinatown. Look at that great old car. You don't see those sort of things, man.
Love it.
When we moved here, we decided that it was, to submerge ourselves and the children into local culture. We put them into local school. The Singapore primary school system is, I believe, the best in the world. It's a very, very straightforward, simple set of lessons and learning. You got your reading, you got your maths, your English, and your sciences, and it's all kind of very, very well done to incorporate everybody who lives in Singapore, as in, if you're Chinese, Malay, Tamil, and everyone has to do the PSLE, which is, just a normal school, primary school exiting exam. And my girls did it. My son's doing it.
Is it stressful? Because people say, especially before PSLE, right before PSLE, it's like so much pressure.
Any exams are stressful. I mean, Singapore is very competitive in that matter. A bit of competition isn't necessarily a bad thing, Having to actually work hard, get the right grades to get into the next school, to get into secondary school, is not a bad thing because it is a meritocracy and you have to do well in your grades to get into the right school, which I think Singapore does fantastically at, simply because of the fact that that's the way the system is. It says it on the tin of Singapore when you come here that this is what's going to happen. So a little bit of pressure is not a bad thing. It also shows kids, in my view anyway, that life's not just an easy bunch of tests and things like that you actually have to work really hard to get into the good next school. And my daughter went to Cedar, so she had to really, really work very hard at her PSLE to get from Newtown Primary School into Cedar. So I think it's actually quite a good thing.
By the way, guys, if you also wanna start working remotely, one of the options is to start your own YouTube channel. And I prepared for you a PDF guide how to make your first $1,000 from your YouTube channel. Okay, if you want this guide, it's for free. There's the link in the description. Go get it. And now back to the video.
What's your perspective about the region and what's going on in the region? Like which countries you believe in, which countries you think it's a big thing in the next 5-10 years?
Thailand's really, really interesting simply because of the fact that with the changes that are going on there, I think that if they continue down a path of growing the economy, there's going to be a huge opportunity there. Well, there already is. It's also a lot of it's about getting the word out there to people and bringing them in to understand it. Indonesia, also the middle class, is a hugely increasing, expanding. Hong Kong's Hong Kong, and it's also the entryway to China, where there's plenty of opportunity, and Hong Kong's an awesome place. I think that there's a huge opportunity in Hong Kong. In terms of the market, I still think Singapore and Hong Kong are probably the best ones, then followed by Thailand and possibly the Philippines and Vietnam for Southeast Asia. We've got a team up in Phuket servicing a lot of in fact we have some Russian clients even in Phuket. We run events here in the office in Singapore on a weekly basis. We're doing them every other week there in Phuket now, and similarly in Hong Kong, just so that we can invite people over to to taste some whiskey, to learn a bit more about whiskey cask investing. We're focusing mainly on Singapore, Hong Kong and Phuket at the moment. Well, when I say Phuket, I mean more Thailand, because we have one of the guys is up in Bangkok most of the time and another one in Phuket. So obviously Bangkok is a huge destination for people to go to, but it's also a really big, vibrant business center. Talk about crazy large cities with lots of traffic. I love the place. I think it's fantastic. But so the idea is to bring whiskey cask investing to people around the region a bit more.
So what's the concept of this type of investments?
I've got a prop right here. Scottish whiskey, when it goes into a barrel, is this color. It's, like vodka or gin. It's the same. Yeah. And if you should have a smell of that.
I didn't know that.
Yeah.
Still smells like whiskey.
Yeah. This is what it looked like when it went into the barrel. And after a while, turns into this color, because the wood imparts the color to the whiskey. So the longer it stays in, it can get darker, but it doesn't tend to. It just has more time to absorb the flavors from the different woods and things that it's been put in.
And this 68%, it decreases.
This one is 43% by volume. So what they do is, once it's reached its maturity and they want to put it into a bottle, when it goes to the bottling line, it'll get diluted. So they take the water, typically the original water which made the whiskey in the first place, and they'll dilute it down to 40 or 43%. When the cask is matured, it gets to a stage where, it's ready for bottling. So then the Whiskey Cask Club member can sell that cask of whiskey, and they can have it bottled, or it goes sold to a bottler or a blender. Or if they really want to, they can bottle it themselves. This is a 14-year-old Highland Park. Highland Park is up here, Scotland. This is right up in the Orkney Islands here.
Cheers.
It's got a unique taste to it.
Yeah, very enjoyable. What's the yield and what's the past yield?
Depending on the whiskey, but an average yield is 12 and 18% per annum. Lefroy is doing nearly 18% consistently for the last few years. This Aberlour will do 14, 15% per year, increase in value. We have casks of new make which start from a few £1,000s up to casks of 12-year-old Aberlour like this, which people can also buy and hang on until it turns into a 21-year-old.
Is it like, if I want to have better return, I need to invest more normally?
Not necessarily. I mean, casks of Lefroy, for example, which tend to be the best yielding, do tend to cost a little bit more. But at the same time, I mean, the difference per annum is only 1-2%.
Okay.
So it's not maybe 3 maximum, so it's not hugely critical. People on average invest around 25,000, 30,000 pounds. That's about 55,000 Singapore dollars. Actually, the duty free in Singapore is probably one of the best places to discover this. You've got a Macallan, because that's what people are mainly interested in. Let's say a 10-year-old Macallan, for the sake of arguments, $120. A 14-year-old Macallan might be $200 and something, $240, $250. An 18-year-old Macallan may be $400-500 a bottle, or 21-year-old. So there's a big market step in each year of the maturation, which is what we're selling. That's all we're selling. So it's not rocket science when you can see that something that is in the shop for 10 years old is certain price, the next one is double that if it's 15 years old, and then double it again by the time it's 20. It's just there in the shop, you can see it.
What's the entry point? How much I need to start?
Roughly about £4,000 or £5,000.
4,000 or 5,000.
8,000 Sing-ish.
What's the record? What's the biggest portfolio for one client you have?
Well, we have a client who bought a Macallan for £500,000, which he flipped that and made 22%, sorry, in 4 days.
And she flipped to some like collector or something?
Yeah, he bottled it actually, and he'd already got someone lined up to buy it. So we have other clients who've got hundreds of thousands of pounds worth of holdings in it. It's very popular because it's a low risk investment. It's not like crypto or, you know, classic cars, which you've got to maintain and spend a lot of money maintaining them. Casks of whiskey, you put them in the cask goes into a bonded warehouse. The insurance for 5 years and the storage is included in the purchase price. That's it. You just wait until it increases. And it's a cost of time investment where all you're doing is paying for the time for it. You're receiving money for the time that it increases in value. So it really is an armchair investment where you have to do nothing. And you don't have to maintain it. Classic cars, £30,000 a year to maintain some of these really expensive old Ferraris and Mercedes. Watches, they fluctuate in value. There was a big disaster for Rolex owners a few years ago where the prices collapsed. I think they've come back up now. Obviously, crypto is its own thing. Wine is interesting. I mean, there are comparisons between whiskey and wine, but with wine, it's a lot more complicated to store it. It's a case of you can leave this bottle of whiskey in the boot of your car in Singapore and drive around with it in the car for a year, and the whiskey will be fine. You do that with a bottle of wine, it will be dead. In an afternoon. So that's one of the major differences is this does not need special air conditioned storage facilities to look after it. And because they're kept in natural air conditioning in Scotland where it never really gets that warm and the humidity's all correctly set too. So it's one of those investments that ultimately people can just fire and forget. Buy it, wait 5 years, decide whether or not they want to keep it for longer or not. And then, as the case may be, we will help them sell it, or if they don't want us to sell it, they can find another broker who will help them sell it for them.
I'm not sure if I mentioned, but I also invested in the whiskey cask. So I have my name, like my name tag, sitting somewhere in the storage in Scotland.
That's right. The storage where your cask is basically here.
I am in Scotland and I'm at our whiskey cask warehouse, as you can see.
What the hell? It's huge.
There's probably about 50, 60 million pounds worth of whiskey in this one facility. All of these casks are insured by the warehouse themselves. So what I will do is I'll ask for a copy of the insurance premium from the managing director of the warehouse. Even if it leaks, even if this was to leak, it'll be covered by the insurance policy. It's absolutely enormous. They've got 9,000 casks here.
How many of them is yours? I mean, like yours or your clients?
In this warehouse, we've got over 100 casks, and we also have there's a warehouse next door to about 50 meters away where we have another couple of hundred casks. A lot of these casks are 10, 15 years old, but these ones here, these are all new make Lathmores, which are filled this year. So you can see all of these are ours and our clients, these casks here.
Okay, which one is mine? Which one that I bought from you?
It's this one here. It's going to get labeled this week. This will have your name on it by the end of this week or next week. This is 200 litres of whiskey in here. Putting the bung in.
What if one of these guys, they want to taste some whiskey this evening?
I think that they have their own. It's not very easy to take the bung out and then taste some and then put it back in again. It's quite complicated.
That's super cool, man. I'm like really excited that I'm basically having a piece of this whiskey cask property somewhere in Scotland.
Well, I can't wait to drink some of this with you one day.
You have the a friends and family discount for our audience, right?
We do. If you use the code word MAX, we have a friends and family discount, special price.
Yeah,
special price.
What's the discount?
Well, it depends on what they're buying because we've got all sorts of really good deals at the moment.
We will leave a link in description, so it's my special link. Then you also mention Max Chernov, and you will get a friends and family deal.
Yeah.
Any interesting personalities who really stands out?
There's a few. There's some German guys who really sort of focused and specific on what they want to buy in shipping. And there's a load of Chinese guys who are particularly interesting. They want to keep large chunks of their money in whiskey casks because it's quite a nice hedge against what's going on with the Chinese economy. You know, there's a guy who owns a bar who may be bottling a couple of his casks. And that bar's in Chengdu, which I've never been to, but I really want to go. He said that once he's done the bottling, that he's going to have a party, and I should come up, which I will do. There's all sorts of interesting characters. Whiskey cask investment's quite a specific thing, so it takes some pretty, you don't have to be adventurous, but there are quite a lot of adventurous people who are our customers.
What was the best advice from someone that you received?
Listen. Always listen, and don't interrupt. And that was mainly through when I worked at News International, when I was doing my journalism training. When people are talking, let them talk, because if you interrupt them, you might be stopping them from saying something critically important that A, would help you in business, or B, make a good story. So it's try not to interrupt people and listen intently to what people say. I think that's probably the most sound bit of advice. Certainly running a sales operation and brokerage it's always good to listen to people, listen to what people have to say, because they're pretty interesting. Most people are really interesting. If you choose to interrupt them, then you might not get to hear that little bit of interesting information that they're about to impart. I've interviewed plenty of people in my life, and I always find that is simply the best way to get people talking, is to just listen and steer them, and you do an excellent job of it, which is why everyone loves watching the videos. That's a life skill, and if people can learn that, I think most things in life are easier if you can understand and work with people to do things. Ultimately, it doesn't really matter where you're from. Ultimately, if you're happy to do something, or if you don't want to do it, don't do it. But it's a case of, I find if you listen to what people have to say, and particularly if they're obsessed by something, like someone who says, "Oh, I know the best chicken rice." Go and try that chicken rice, it might be really good.